Greetings, salutations, respect and love. I am Scott. You're in the Prog Corner, and today, it's a very special episode. Last week I did on the Sunday Prog stream. I ranked the top 100 women in Prague, and wouldn't you know it, the great Annie Haslam was number one. So it makes sense that today we go through their discography, rank them. They were founded in 1969 by a couple of cats from the Yardbirds, no less. Keith Reef and Jim McCarty. They were joined by Keith's sister Jane and Louis Sinamo and John Hawken. They put out 2 albums, and then that band kind of fell apart. And then they got their classic lineup put together. Of course, Annie Haslam, Mike Dunford, John Trout, John Camp, and Terry Sullivan. Tout, not Trout. He's not a fish. Yeah, so the band that did those first 2 albums, they actually reformed later on, put a few records out, I think like 4. I really like their sophomore album, the self-titled Illusion, which came out in 1978. We're not going to rank any of those Illusion albums. We're ranking the ones that say Renaissance on there. Well, not all of them, because there were a couple records that came out in 1994. Dunsforth put out The Other Woman with a different singer, Stephanie Adlington. Good voice, but not Annie. And then in 1997, they did Ocean Gypsy. Those were called Michael Dunford's Renaissance. I'm not including those, nor am I including the great 1976 live album, Live at Carnegie Hall, which was just amazing. Yeah, so we're going to get into all the good stuff here. There are 13 albums we're going to look at, and I'm starting at number 13. It's 1983, and the 80s were terrible for prog rock bands, and Timeline is one of the absolute worst you'll ever hear. This album is absolutely terrible. There's no Betty Thatcher writing lyrics on this album. So, yeah, that's a bummer. Of the original members from Mach 2 of Renaissance, you got Annie Haslam, you got John Camp, but, there wasn't really a whole lot of there. I didn't care for this record at all. You had a couple people playing keyboards, Peter Gosling and Nick Magnus. You might know those people. On drums, you had Peter Barron and Ian Mosley. There's a couple decent songs on here, Flight, Orient Express, but leave this thing alone. It's terrible. At number 12, its predecessor, almost as bad, Camera came out in 1981. It promptly hit 196 on the UK album charts. Again, you just have Camp, Dunford, and Haslam from the classic lineup here. Peter Gosling and Peter Barron round out the lineup. So there's no Tout, there's no Sullivan. This is basically an AOR album with some new wave flavors. The title track isn't horrible. There seem to be a whole lot of songs about cameras in the early 80s and, former prog bands from Gentle Giant to Yes to Renaissance. Probably the only song I really like here is Ukraine Ways. That's pretty good. Okishi-san's all right. Jigsaw, just not good. Not a good album. Skip it at all costs at number 11. From 2000, they came back from the ashes with the Annie Haslam, Michael Dunford, and Terry Sullivan, and the album was called Tuscany. Not a bad album. Yeah, there's no John Camp here. There's no Betty Thatcher lyrics here, but you do get John Tout on 3 songs. You get Roy Wood, who Annie Haslam's husband, on 3 tracks. And then Mickey Simons is the keyboard player here. The Lady from Tuscany's a good track. 1,000 Roses, a real good song to close the album out. And then there are a couple shorter songs I really liked. In My Life and The Race are both really good. Not a horrible way to come back from being silent all those years. But at number 10, it's Grandine El Vinto. Came out in 2013. They reissued it in 2014 with the much better title, Symphony of Light. This is a cool little record right here. You got Annie Haslam, Michael Dunford, and they're joined by what's his name? Tom Brislin. Yeah, man. From Kansas and from Yes. He's on keyboards. You get Jason Hart on this record from the band I and Thou, who put out one really good record with an Annie Haslam cover, actually. Looking forward to a second album from him, absolutely. You got a couple of guests. You got John Wetton showing up here, which is cool because he was a touring member of Renaissance way back in like 1970. And Ian Anderson shows up, plays a little bit of flute, but both of the title tracks are good. Grandina El Vento and Sinfonio Light. I like both those songs. Waterfall's cool. And then the album closes out with a track called The Mystic and the Muse, which is really good. Not a bad record. If this is their swan song, and it totally looks like it is, not a bad way to go at number 9. The aforementioned sophomore album, Illusion, came out in 1971. This was the last time you had, the Yardbird connection. This album did not chart. The band kind of fell apart while they were doing the album. They had to bring some people back in the studio to finish it up. Just kind of a mess, but there are some really good tracks on here. Golden Thread is great. And they had to bring some people back in the studio to flesh out the album. And they recorded a song called Past Orbits of Dust. I like that. I think that's a really cool track. Same lineup as the first album pretty much, but you do get Michael Dunford on Mr. Pine, one track on here. Paul Whitehead did the album cover, which I never knew that, man. Doesn't even look like him. At number 8. The last album of the 70s for these guys, 1979, saw them drop Azure Door, which I didn't hate. Yeah, they're obviously moving in a much more commercial direction here. There's no long songs on here for the first time. It is kind of full-blown commercial, but I do like it. You still have the classic lineup here, and you have some good songs. Jekyll and Hyde's really good. Golden Key. Secret Mission's nice. Flood at Lyon, I like that track. This was their 9th album. It actually hit number 125 in the US and number 73 in the UK, which I didn't know. I didn't think this probably charted at all, but the album that came out right before it might have something to do with it. At number 7, it's their debut album from 1969. This actually did chart in the UK. It hit number 60, and I guess that's that Yardbirds effect. The label was, using the Yardbird connection to market this thing. The lineup is Jane and Keith Reeve, Jim McCarty, John Hawken, and Louis Semino. This was dropped on islands in the UK and some small, tiny little label in the US. They had a different album cover for it in the US too, which was kind of the way things went back in the day. But it's a nice album. Kings and Queens is a really good track. Bullets is cool. The whole idea was to try to bring classical music into a rock setting, and for the most part, I think this album is very successful. I do like it. Number 6, it's A Song for All Seasons from 1978. And yeah, this is the one that had the hit. Northern Lights was a big, big hit in the UK. Top 10 hit for them. Day of the Dreamer is really good. The title track is great. You still have the classic lineup here. David Henschel produced this thing, and as a result, it did very good in the UK. I think this is the highest charting album they had in the UK at number 35. Didn't do quite as good in the US. It peaked at number 58 in 1978, but it's a good record. I really like it. But now we're getting into the top 5, and honestly, the top 5 are just phenomenal. You could pick any one of these as your entree into Renaissance, and you'll be just fine at number 5. It's the 3rd album, Prologue from 1972, kind of the first album with the new lineup, because you got Annie Haslam in the band, you got John Tout, John Camp, Terrence Sullivan, you got a guy named Rob Hendry playing guitar here, with Michael Dunford just basically on arrangements. He wasn't officially a member of the band yet. You even get an appearance from Francis Monkman, which is cool because both Renaissance and Curved Air were both managed by the same guy, Miles Copeland. I love this album. It's great. Kiev is so good. Sounds of the Sea, Raja Khan is the song that Francis Monkman's on. Closes out the album. It's great. At number 5, I love Prologue. At number 4, it's Turn of the Cards from 1974, their 5th album. This one kind of gets beat up a little bit as far as the classic Renaissance records, and I don't know why, man. Mother Russia's on here. Things I Don't Understand. Fantastic song, co-written by McCarty. I think that might have been his last songwriting credit with the band. Just fantastic. Running Hard. This album hit number 94 in the US, and it's the classic lineup. lineup of Haslam, Dunford, Tout, Camp, and Sullivan. It was on Sire in the US, which probably didn't hurt at all. BTM in the UK, I know that didn't help. I think that was Miles Copeland's label that he was trying to round up progressive bands under one umbrella. But here we go, number 3, man. This is my personal favorite. You know how it is. The first album you hear by a band is the one that really sets the tone. The first Renaissance album I ever heard was Novella. My sister bought it back in 1977, and I kept hearing this music out of her bedroom, and I'm like, man, I got to steal that album, and I did, and I love it. It's fantastic. This was their highest charting album in the US, peaked at number 46. And, you know, all that hard work paid off because Renaissance really paid their dues in the U.S. market. They should have been bigger. This was their biggest album in the U.S. Like I said, 1977. It was on Sire in the U.S., Warner Brothers in the U.K., the classic lineup. 5 songs, and all 5 of them are great. Can You Hear Me? The Sisters, Midas Man, This Captive Heart, and Touching Ones. Just great. I love this album. It's probably rated a little too high, but, you know, that's my internal bias. You know how that goes at number 2. From 1973, their 4th album, Ashes Are Burning. Oh, this was the one where it all came together for them. This is the one where you could tell they had definitely figured it out. The new lineup had really gelled. Can You Understand? Wow, what a great song. At the Harbor, the title track is great. This didn't chart in the UK, but it hit 171 on the Billboard charts. So yeah, we're still on tiny little labels at this point. We're on One Way Records in the US and Sovereign Records in the UK. So that didn't do them any favors, but man, a classic for all time. And it's shocking to me that there's actually one better, and yeah, man, at number 1, it's Scheherazade and Other Stories from 1975. Their classic 6th album hit number 48 in the US, did not chart in the UK, but man, this is an amazing album. Side 1, you got 3 songs, A Trip to the Fair, Vultures Fly High, that song about music critics. Betty Thatcher was pretty salty. Ocean Gypsy, and then side 2 is all one song, the Song of Scheherazade. I can never pronounce that. Yeah, this was on Sire in the US. That definitely helped. BTM in the UK. And it is the classic lineup, man. I'm going to say it one more time. The classic lineup of Annie Haslam, Michael Dunford, John Tout, John Camp, and Terrence Sullivan. What an amazing 5-piece they were. What an amazing band. I love Renaissance. Those top 5 or 6 albums to me are all pretty close to being perfect. It's a different kind of prog, yeah, it's symphonic, but they lean real heavy on the classical end and the folk end. You know, the guitars are there, but they're not like, you know, real flashy way up in the mix. It's more keyboard driven, piano, symphony, orchestrations in the background. You've heard them before. You don't need me explaining to you what Renaissance is all about. They're just amazing, and that's why I'm ranking their discography today. Anyway, yesterday we did Let's Talk About Yes on the live stream. We couldn't get all the way through the discography, so Sunday coming up, we're going to do part 2 of just investigating all things Yes. It's going to be great. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to take the day off. Looks like work is piling up pretty good on me, so I'll be back here on Wednesday, and we're going to be looking at a brand new album out of the UK that I'm really excited to talk to you guys about. Think about what it is. Let me know in the comments if you figured it out. But anyway, I love you guys. Peace in the Middle East, free Tibet, and God save that sucker. God save that Chucky the Third. Chucky needs your saving. You don't want him to get his head chopped off like Chucky the First now, do you? Anyway, I'll see you soon. Peace.